My name is Nick Carter. I'm 36 years old, raised in small-town Nebraska, and damn proud of it. I own an associate degree in agriculture, but my real passion has always been running my own feed store. Simple dream, right? After finishing junior college, I married my high school sweetheart, Emma. We'd known each other since kindergarten, and I thought we were the perfect match. She was the only woman I ever loved or even imagined building a life with. Emma had beauty, no doubt. Dark hair, hazel eyes, and a sharp wit that could cut steel. Even after having our two boys, Ryan and Ethan, she still turned heads. I was proud of her, and I worked hard to make her proud of me. But Emma had a flaw. She was obsessed with the high life. While I was content in our small town, she constantly had her nose in those glossy magazines about celebrities, rich socialites, and designer labels. She dreamed of fancy cars and big city lights, things I couldn't provide on a farmer's paycheck. However, I tried. For Emma, I took a job managing a high-end feed store in Lincoln. It was closer to the city and catered to hobby farmers and wealthy suburbanites. It paid well, and I liked the work. I thought it would make her happy. And for a while, it seemed to. But then she got a job at a medical equipment company called Atlas Medical. It was an office gig, and Emma threw herself into it with zeal. And that's when things started to change. At first, I didn't think much of it. The job meant dressing up, blouses, skirts, and heels instead of jeans and t-shirts. She was happier and livelier, so I supported her. But soon, her focus shifted away from home. I found myself doing everything for the boys: daycare drop-offs, cooking, cleaning. I even did the laundry, though Emma always insisted on ironing her own clothes to perfection. Money started disappearing, too. We had always been careful savers, putting aside cash to one day buy my dream feed store. But with Emma's job came salon appointments, designer outfits, and more makeup than I'd ever seen her wear before. When I asked about it, she'd get defensive. I work hard, Nick. Don't I deserve to treat myself once in a while? What could I say to that? After a few attempts, I stopped asking. Just in case, I opened a separate savings account without telling her, just to protect what little we had left. Then came the real warning signs. Emma started working late, overtime, she said. Private phone calls became a thing. She suddenly wanted a newer car and even mentioned breast implants. I wasn't a genius, but I wasn't dumb either. Everything pointed that she was having an affair. The realization didn't shatter me as much as it should have. By then, I'd already lost hope of fixing what we once had. My only thought was to minimize the damage and get out before it ruined me entirely. But before that, I needed proof. One Wednesday morning, Emma was getting ready for work, and I noticed something peculiar: fancy underwear. She always wore it on Wednesdays, paired with her best clothes. I didn't say anything but made a mental note. That day, I asked my two best employees, Mike and Darren, to cover for me. I trusted them, and they knew me well enough not to ask too many questions. I parked my truck across from Atlas Medical and waited. Around 11 a.m., Emma left the building in her car. I followed her at a safe distance as she drove across town to a Holiday Inn. She parked at the far end of the lot. 5 minutes later, a man in a red Mustang pulled up. I watched as he got out of his car and waved to Emma. He was tall, wearing a suit, everything I wasn't. They walked together into a room on the ground floor. He already had the key. I felt like someone had driven a nail into my gut. There it was, confirmation. Emma was cheating on me. But instead of storming in like a fool, I did something smarter. I waited. After 20 minutes, I got out of my truck, walked over to Emma's car, and snipped 2 of her valve stems with my wire cutters, front and back tires. For now, I didn't touch the Mustang. That would come later. By the time I got home that evening, Emma was already there. She said she'd had a flat tire, but one of her coworkers helped her fix it. Nothing in her voice hinted at guilt or remorse. That's when I knew she wasn't just betraying me. She didn't even respect me enough to hide it properly. So it was time to plan my next move. After that Wednesday, my life split into 2 parts. Outwardly, I went about my days as usual, working, taking care of the boys, and pretending everything was fine. Inwardly, I was seething. The betrayal sat in my gut like a lump of lead, and every fake smile Emma threw my way made it heavier. I wasn't about to let her walk all over me though. No, if she wanted to treat our life like a game, then I was going to make sure she lost. The next morning, I made a detour after dropping the boys at daycare. I drove by her office and found the red Mustang parked in the lot. It was in a reserved spot with a sign that read Darren Hughes, sales manager. Darren. It was good to have a name. Emma had mentioned a few of her coworkers in passing, but she'd never said a word about Darren. That didn't surprise me. A little digging was in order, and luckily, I had just the person to help. Mike's wife, Kim, worked in HR at Atlas Medical. Over lunch that day, Mike handed me a folder with everything I needed to know about Darren Hughes. Married for 7 years to a woman named Lisa. No kids. Mid-level manager with a decent salary, but he'd been reprimanded a few times for unprofessional conduct, a polite way of saying he'd hit on the wrong women at work. I also got his address, phone numbers, and even his social security number. Not bad for 24 hours. That weekend, I decided to shake things up. I took the boys out to the country to visit one of my longtime customers, Carol, who owned a farm on the outskirts of town. Carol was kind, motherly, and her daughter, Lauren, had just come home from vet school for the summer. Lauren was sharp, kind, and natural with the boys, who took to her instantly. We spent the day riding horses, feeding goats, and having a picnic under the sun. For the first time in weeks, I felt a little lighter. Lauren and I spent most of the afternoon talking, and I could tell she enjoyed the company as much as I did. That night, when we got home, Emma didn't even ask how our day had gone. She was on the couch, glued to her phone, barely acknowledging the kids as they excitedly told her about the farm animals. It didn't matter. Her indifference only confirmed what I already knew: she'd checked out of our family. On Monday, I paid another visit to Darren's Mustang. This time, I got creative. I borrowed Mike's floor jack and rigged a steel plate with 4 sharp spikes welded to it. I parked across the lot from the Holiday Inn and waited. Sure enough, by 11 a.m., Emma showed up. 10 minutes later, Darren pulled in. Once they were safely inside their room, I went to work. I rolled the jack under the Mustang's oil pan and cranked it up until I heard a satisfying pop. The spikes punched through the metal, and black oil began to drip onto the pavement. Next, I slid it under the gas tank and did the same. I didn't touch Emma's car that day. She could deal with a stranded Darren for once. I got in the car and started the engine. Then I took out a bottle of flammable liquid I had prepared in advance. The gasoline and oil from under the Mustang had already spread around it, so I took out a rag, put some of it in the bottle, set it on fire, and threw it towards the Mustang as I was driving away. A moment later, I heard the explosion. Darren's Mustang went up in flames like the 4th of July. When Emma got home that night, she was unusually quiet. She barely touched her dinner and went to bed early. I didn't say a word. The next day, I got a visit from Detective John Fenton. He was polite enough, but it was clear he wasn't here for small talk. "Mr. Carter," he said, sitting across from me in the office, "where were you yesterday around noon?" I handed him my delivery logs, painstakingly filled out and initialed by both Mike and me. Every stop was accounted for. Fenton gave me a long look, then chuckled. "You're pretty thorough, aren't you?" "Just a habit," I replied with a shrug. He asked a few more questions about Emma and whether I knew a Darren Hughes. I played dumb, denying everything. After a while, he seemed satisfied and left with a warning: "If you hear anything, give me a call. And let's try to avoid any domestic disputes, okay?" That evening, I noticed something interesting. Emma, for all her indifference, seemed spooked. She tiptoed around me like I was a ticking time bomb. She didn't mention Darren's car, and I didn't bring it up. Instead, I started making plans to end things once and for all. I visited a lawyer the next day and began filing for divorce. I also got tested for STDs, just to cover my bases. And then I called Carol. "Think you and Lauren could handle some company this weekend?" That Saturday, I took the boys back out to Carol's farm. If there was one place where I could find some peace, it was there. Lauren was waiting for us, this time with a picnic already packed and a trail ride planned. Watching her with Ryan and Ethan felt like seeing what my life could have been with someone who actually cared about me and the boys. Lauren didn't ask about Emma or my marriage, and I didn't bring it up. I could tell she had questions, but she was too kind to pry. Instead, we talked about her plans to open a large animal veterinary clinic and how she wanted to breed show horses someday. By the time we left that evening, the boys were asleep in the truck, and I felt a strange mix of hope and regret. I wasn't just losing Emma, I was losing the life I thought I'd have. But out here with Lauren and the kids, I could see a future. Maybe not the one I planned, but a damn good one nonetheless. The following Wednesday, Emma slipped back into her old routine: morning shower, hair done, fancy underwear. A new addition was a sleek black dress and a pair of heels I'd never seen before. Darren must have replaced his Mustang, I thought, because her attitude had shifted back to smug and self-assured. Once she was gone, I called Mike and Darren into my office. "We're on," I said. Mike grinned. "What's the plan?" "We're giving the new ride a makeover." By 11:15 a.m., I was parked in my usual spot at the Holiday Inn. Emma pulled in, followed shortly by Darren, now driving a brand new Porsche Boxster. Freddie, another buddy of mine, rolled up in his cousin's old beater van. I handed him 2 large bottles of hydrochloric acid. "Make it count," I said. Freddie went to work while I drove across town to deliver lunch to Detective Fenton. At Fenton's desk, I laid out 2 pulled pork sandwiches and a couple of Cokes. "What's this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Lunch," I replied with a grin. "I figured I'd make up for wasting your time the other day." Fenton leaned back in his chair, smirking. "What are you up to, Nick?" "Nothing at all. Just making friends." We chatted about nothing for a while, but I kept him talking. I needed him out of the way for at least an hour. Meanwhile, Freddie was at the Holiday Inn parking lot, emptying the acid onto Darren's precious Porsche. The leather seats, dashboard, and tires got a healthy dose. To top it off, Freddie poured mothballs into the gas tank. By the time he was done, the car looked like it had been through a war zone. He even stopped by Emma's car and snipped her valve stems again for good measure. Back at Fenton's desk, I casually called the boys' daycare. "Hi, it's Nick. I'm running late today. Could you call Emma and ask her to pick up the boys? Her work number's 40255551170. Thanks a million." Fenton caught the smirk on my face and chuckled. "You're playing a dangerous game, Nick." "Not me," I said with mock innocence. At the Holiday Inn, Darren must have heard the daycare call from Emma, because he ran out of the room in a panic. According to Freddie, Darren froze in the doorway when he saw his Porsche. The acid had eaten through the paint, leather, and tires, and the mothballs in the gas tank guaranteed the engine would be toast if he tried to start it. Freddie said Darren stood there, slack-jawed, as Emma came running out after him, demanding to know what was wrong. "What's wrong?" Darren bellowed. "What the hell is this?" The two of them stood in the lot, arguing, as Freddie slipped away unnoticed. Emma came home that night, her face pale and tight. She picked at her dinner, not meeting my eyes. I didn't press her. I wanted her to stew in her own guilt. The next morning, I got a call from Fenton. "You're not going to believe this," he said, laughing. "Darren Hughes' new Porsche got totaled yesterday. Insurance won't cover it because it was parked in a private lot, and he's out $75,000. "Sounds like bad luck," I said, keeping my tone casual. "You're unbelievable," Fenton replied, though I could hear the admiration in his voice. That weekend, I packed up the boys and headed back to Carol's farm. Lauren was waiting for us with open arms, and for the first time in months, I let myself relax. By the time we left, I had a clear head and a plan for what came next. The next week started off quiet. Too quiet. Emma acted like nothing had happened, but I could tell she was rattled. On Wednesday morning, though, her old routine returned: shower, new perfume, and black lace underwear. I didn't say a word, but I knew she was planning another rendezvous. By now, I was done playing small games. It was time to wrap this up. I called Marge Gilbert, one of my best customers and the wife of Alan Gilbert, CEO of Atlas Medical. Marge and I had always gotten along well. She liked my no-nonsense attitude, and I knew her loyalty ran deep for people who treated her with respect. After I dropped the boys at daycare, I swung by her estate to make a delivery. Marge greeted me with her usual warmth. "You're not your chipper self today, Nick," she said, pouring coffee as I unloaded her order. "Something on your mind?" I hesitated, then gave her a carefully crafted version of the truth. "Emma's been distant lately. I think she's involved with someone at work. I'm not sure if she's being pressured into it or if it's her choice, but either way, I don't know how to fix it." Marge's face hardened. "Who's the other man?" I pretended to be reluctant before answering. "His name's Darren Hughes." Marge's lips thinned. "Alan will want to know about this. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior at Atlas." By Thursday, the pieces were in place. Marge called me that morning and told me to meet her at the Atlas Medical Headquarters. When I arrived, she led me through a back entrance straight to Alan Gilbert's office. Alan was a no-nonsense man with a sharp gaze and a reputation for ruthlessness. He greeted me cordially, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled to have his company dragged into a domestic mess. Still, Marge vouched for me, and Alan had his legal team investigate quietly. By the time I sat in his office, they'd already confirmed Darren's affair with Emma. Alan smirked as he leaned back in his chair. "Nick, we're going to take care of this in a way that works for everyone, except Darren and your wife." At 11 a.m., I was parked outside the Holiday Inn again. Darren, this time driving a company car, a white BMW, arrived right on time, with Emma following moments later. They went into their usual room, completely unaware of what was about to hit them. Back at Atlas, Alan was on the phone with Darren. "Darren, this is Alan Gilbert. Sorry to interrupt your lunch, but we need to discuss a sensitive matter." Darren's voice, muffled but frantic, came through the speaker. Yes, sir. Of course. What's this about?" Alan kept his tone icy. "It's come to our attention that you've been engaging in an inappropriate relationship with another employee. I trust you're aware of our zero-tolerance policy on workplace misconduct." Darren stammered. "Sir, it's not what it looks like." Alan cut him off. "Let me make this easy for you. Is Emma Carter in the room with you right now?" Silence. Then quietly, "Yes, sir." "Good. Is this relationship consensual?" "Yes, sir," Darren mumbled. "Put her on." Emma's voice came on the line, shaky but defiant. "Mr. Gilbert, Alan didn't let her finish. "Emma, did Darren coerce you into this relationship, or is it consensual?" "It's consensual," she said after a long pause. "Thank you for confirming. You're both terminated, effective immediately. Your personal belongings have been packed and will be waiting for you at the security desk. Consider this your last day at Atlas Medical." When I got home that evening, Emma was already there, sitting on the couch with 2 boxes of her office belongings at her feet. "You had to ruin everything, didn't you?" she spat as I walked in. I didn't answer. I just handed her the divorce papers. "What's this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "It's over," I said simply. Her expression shifted from anger to despair, then to cold indifference. "Fine. You want out? You've got it." The next day, I made my rounds. I closed our joint bank accounts, paid off the credit cards and canceled them, notified the landlord that we'd be moving out by the end of the month, arranged for the utilities to be shut off the following week. By the time I was done, there wasn't much left for Emma to cling to. That weekend, the boys and I packed our things. We left behind the furniture, appliances, and anything else that tied us to that house. As we pulled out of the driveway, Emma stood on the porch, watching us go. She didn't say a word. It took 3 months for the divorce to finalize, but honestly, it felt like a lifetime. Emma didn't fight it. She didn't have the energy, or the resources, to put up a legal battle. The notarized statements from her and Darren admitting to their consensual affair had been attached to the paperwork. My lawyer had made it clear, if she contested, those statements would find their way to Darren's wife, Lisa. Emma knew she was cornered. The settlement was clean. I got full custody of the boys, no alimony, no child support. She kept her car, what was left of her designer wardrobe, and a pile of credit card debt. I left her the house. It wasn't out of kindness. I'd already had the utilities shut off. Let her figure that out. In the weeks that followed, I focused on moving forward. I started my new job about 100 miles away. It came with a higher salary, better hours, and a clear path to becoming a partner in the business. The boys adjusted faster than I expected, probably because I kept them busy with activities and new adventures. As for Emma, she faded into the background. She didn't call, didn't write, and didn't visit the boys. I'd like to say it hurt me, but the truth is, I expected it. She'd checked out of our family long before I filed for divorce. Then, about 6 weeks after we moved, something unexpected happened. The new property next to my job had been under construction for a couple of months. We all assumed it was going to be another office building, but one Friday afternoon, I spotted a sign being put up, Gilbert Veterinary Clinic, specializing in large animals. I couldn't help but smile. The next morning, the boys and I drove by the clinic, and as we pulled in, I saw her. Lauren was outside, directing a team of workers unloading equipment. When she spotted us, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Nick." "Boys," she called, rushing over. Ryan and Ethan bolted out of the truck, running straight into her arms. "You're here?" I asked, barely hiding my surprise. Lauren grinned. "Yep. Mom and Dad helped me buy the property. I'm setting up the clinic and building a house nearby." We spent the rest of the day catching up, and by the time we left, the boys were begging me to come back. Lauren didn't have to say it, but I knew the door was open for us. 5 years later, life couldn't be more different. Lauren's clinic is thriving, and so is her horse breeding program. We got married 2 years ago and welcomed twin daughters shortly after. The boys adore their little sisters and have fully embraced their new life. I finally own my own business, a chain of 6 feed stores spread across the region. It's more than I ever dreamed of, and it's all built on the foundation of hard work, loyalty, and the kind of love I never thought I'd find again. Emma? She disappeared completely. Last I heard, she was bouncing between jobs, still chasing the high life she could never quite reach. Darren didn't last much longer in town, either. His wife divorced him, and his reputation made it impossible for him to find work locally. I don't dwell on them anymore. They're relics of a past I left behind. Sometimes, though, when I sit on the porch of our home and watch Lauren and the kids playing in the yard, I think about how close I came to losing everything. And I remind myself, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the best thing that ever could.